kind of a transitional video. I've been off on a tangent doing some railroad type things. Had a eye injury which kind of slowed down the saw progress for a while. I can do some things, getting back to the point where it'll be safe. This little saw hasn't been out, and I had rocked the chain pretty bad. This is what it had, and touched it up with the grinder, so that saw should be back in service. I still have this 570 and a 572 here and there in boxes and parts and stuff like that I'm going to hope to get to this weekend following week. It's going to rain on Saturday, so this will be a perfect time to get back into the shop. That 570 is kind of an interesting saw. Again, it's one of those kind of like my box of lost and misfit chains. I think the 570 falls into that category of lost and misfit saws. Husky sold it for a while. I think they still do in some form. And it was an outgrowth of the 575, which probably is the most unpopular Husqvarna saw in that displacement class I ever sold. Was it really all that bad? It had some teething issues, it sure did. But it was the precursor to the 576, which was a pretty good saw, but yet again failed to really set the marketplace on fire. And I find it interesting, as I had said in the prior video, that the cylinders on those things strike a very interesting resemblance to the ones on the 585, 592 series. So the design lives in spirit, right? And my 585 is a fine saw. I really like that saw. But this one right here, you know, it had a massive air leak. And what I found on it was, I believe that seal was failing or failed. So I'm just going to put new bearings in it. Got nothing better to do. And I've kissed it right now with a file, but there was a spot where it looked like it was drawing air and oil in from the bar oil reservoir. So that's why it came apart, and we'll put it back together and put new parts in it. And my goal on that saw is to have a nice running 70cc class saw and do it all for under $400, which would be what it would cost to buy an aftermarket saw in that caliber in terms of speed and power, etc. Kind of bring the hobby back to taking old OEM saws, you know, alongside the clone saws. I see both of them as legitimate approaches, but the enthusiast in me prefers to go with OEM when I can. The practical side of me recognizes that some of these kit saws have now evolved into usefulness. So that's another discussion for other people to have on a different day. But what I'm going to do now is touch up yet another chain. And I have a couple of jobs I have to do. And one of them in particular is a little bit of a PITA in the sense it's pine. I don't like cutting pine. All that pine sap and tar gets over everything. You know, these are some of the things that happen, you know, I guess behind the scenes doing jobs like this. And I kind of thought of a title. It might be something like logging equipment meets residential saw job, because being retired, I have the time to take my time. And on this particular job, it's about getting them down in a specific location safely. So I'll spend a little bit more time. And what I'm going to do is use the logging winch to pull the tree over, and I'm going to have a fairly heavy hinge to make sure it goes exactly where I want it to go. And while not the most efficient way for sure, since I'm retired and have the time, I'll take the sure way versus the efficient way in this case. But that also goes into the chains. Instead of buying new and sharp and all that, I don't want to do that in this job. It's just going to get all gummy and crap. So here we are yet again. I'm going to file up one of these chains. Basically, I hit it with the grinder just because this one had gotten rocked. Bring it back past the rocked area, and then I'm just going to hit it with a file on the rakers to bring it down to like 30 thousandths. I save the money of buying a new chain, but in this case, it's earning money as well. So using the stuff that I probably wouldn't use on my logging jobs, but using them in these residential type things, it works. You know, it saves me money. It cuts fast enough when I'm done. So that's kind of where the mindset is. So I'll fold in a little bit of video, but the two things I have to do with this job here is break them down to the point where those people can haul them away. I don't have to do the cleanup that way. I just have to break it down to where they're manageable. And the other thing is I have to absolutely make sure they go exactly where I want them to go, because I have to work around a septic field, some lines, you know, a bunch of other things. So to me, I'll just cut open face, back cut. I'll leave a thick hinge. I'll take that cable and just pull that sucker right over. And that's what we're going to do. Now there's another thing going on. I had to get rid of my Canon camera because it basically failed. The memory failed. So we're trying a different approach using a cheese ball stand from Walmart, and then it has sort of a grip on my old cell phone that I used to use. It's a Samsung A51. That's what's taking this video right now. I had bought a Samsung S23 Ultra because I was looking for higher quality videos for the trains. But the train thing, I've been spending a fair amount of time with that because I really can't do much saw stuff. All right, let's see what we got. And I don't know if it'll show. I'm going to take down the rakers just a little bit, but the basic tooth form isn't bad. I don't know if that'll show or not. So I think we just throw it on, take a couple of swipes off the rakers, and just see what we have as a chain is what I think I'm going to do on this one. Fairly consistent tooth form, and I focused on trying to pull a little bit out of here, the gullet area, try to increase that a little bit. I think what I want to do on some of these chains is get that tooth form with a grinder, my raker right, and then I want to take out some of that back, this tooth, and see if I can make it easier for chips to fly out the back of the chain. But anyway, so we have one to go out and work with. Let's see if we can go limb a tree with it. So this video is kind of like the rest of the story moment, where when we're not doing nice and cool looking trees, I gotta screw around with this stuff. This is another job that we're gonna do in this next month or so, and this is definitely gonna be a lift because I got 2 sets of wires I have to work around, and of course you don't want to get into the electricity. It's not something I really saw as channel interesting, but we're gonna add some of that to the channel this next month or so. You might ask, how come now, not before? Well, it's really part of that theme of grinding on the chains. And rather than spending all that time and trying to make them perfect, or even spending $40 on a new chain, if I have a system that makes them fast enough to where I'm not thinking about how slow the saw is, and I'm thinking about, wow, this is cutting pretty nice, and then can go back to focusing on the job, that's the definition of win. Especially if I just put, say, 10-15 minutes of elbow grease in versus either $40 of a new chain, or, you know, a half hour or so trying to just get that tooth perfect. You know what I'm saying? Rip it out with that that grinder and touch it up with a file. There's your 15, and then go to work. Use that thing. I have a box of them. So the other thing is, in a lot of these trees like this, I don't know what's inside. I can't tell you how many times I got into it, you know, with a tree like this, and then also I hit a piece of metal where somebody had an outside light on there, or wire, or fence post, or something. So having these chains that I'm grinding up now, cutting fast enough, I think I've got kind of a setup that kind of works on the hardwood for sure. I went a little more aggressive on that last log I just finished doing because it was softwood and I could. And but there you go. You start going off into the weeds, and it doesn't freaking matter, because I wasn't thinking about how fast it cut until I grabbed a handful of chips and brought it up to the camera, because that's when it crossed my mind. But that chain cut good enough where it just didn't cross my mind. It was cutting fast enough. Yeah, I can make it cut faster. Yeah, the new ones might cut faster. That's a maybe. But it did fast enough for me to focus on the work, and that's the definition of win. And plus, in trees like this, I know I'm hitting metal. So instead of wasting 2 or 3 chains at $40 a chain, I just go back and touch it up with a grinder, use it again. I mean, if I can get through these 2 jobs on 1 or 2 chains that I've ground up, you know, from the logging box, that's the definition of win, isn't it? And then you're back at the hacienda there. I think the other point is that tractor and that winch, really the only thing I have to do when I have a tree I need to go in a specific place is get the hinge lined up, back cut, face cut open enough where it doesn't break the hinge before it's beyond the point of no return, at least when the trees begin to fall. And just pull it down with a winch, you know, and it just saves a whole lot of aggravation. By having too much of a hinge for a normal fall, it allows me to just work on that, make sure I got it tuned up the way I want, and then hit the button and pull it over. It's done.